welcome, welcome. It's Macmillan Wealth Solutions' pleasure to host this lunch. My name's Kathy Macmillan, and I see some old friends, I see some new friends. You're all welcome, welcome. So, what do you think is the most important thing in life? Health. Health. Our mantra is health is the new wealth. If you have bags of money and you're laying on the sofa, what's the point? So there's a great correlation between health and wealth. Lots of statistics on it. The healthier you are, the higher your income, the wealthier you are. You have energy, you see opportunity. So the healthier you are, the wealthier you are. And we like that. We like performance. So what's the second most important thing in life? Friends, family, people you love. And the third most important, wealth, money. It opens doors. It allows you to go. I just got back from Tofino. And now, finding my way there was interesting, but it allows you those holidays and those health breaks, which are really important. Years ago, I took a course out of Toronto. It was called Strategic Coach, and it was for advisors and people of that nature. And the very first thing that Strategic Coach did was had you take out your calendar, and every 6 weeks you book time off to recharge, to think, to become entrepreneurial. So this healthy, wealthy, and wise, the equation. I'd just like to I'm just here to get you seated and say hi. This is going to be co-hosted by Elise Steeple and Peter Churchill-Smith. So I just want to introduce, come on up you guys. We have an unequal team. So we are almost a single family office structure. We keep our talent in our team because it's at our fingertips and it's quick. And all of you will recognize some of these names. I started a number of years ago, about 6-7 years ago, going, we're pretty good at tax, but we need to be excellent. Pam DeLima, put your hand up there. This is our CPA. She runs hard all day. Isn't that true? I think we have Chris Thurber. Can't see him here. Put up right over there. He's our insurance specialist. Now, these two specialists do your plan writing. So taxation, insurance, risk management. So we write, the core of our business is writing those big, robust financial plans. That's our roadmap to life. And you're allowed to take some shortcuts and deviate, but that plan is our Bible. I see on my left, Michaela Boggs. Michaela keeps it together for me, which is no small challenge. She works my calendar, gets me the right place, the right time, and she oversees events like this. We have someone brand new working with Michaela, Kira Caulfield. Where's Kira? Want to come in and have a wave, Kira? She's in my direct line of sight, not an enviable position, that's for sure. There she is. I think she's been with us 5 weeks, so the trauma is diminishing, so that's good. Who else oh, Mona, my goodness. My right hand Mona, right there. You know Mona, processes, rules the roost, keeps us all going. Anybody else I've missed here? Eva's back at the office. She just passed her portfolio manager's CIM designation, so she's trading. So that's good. Anyone else? Michelle. Oh, Michelle, brand new. I think she's been here 2 weeks. Michelle is working with Eva and Peter. Her role is keeping Peter in line. So Kira and Michaela, me in line. Michelle, Eva, Peter in line. So I'd like to introduce two of my successors. It takes 3 to replace Mona and I. I'm not going anywhere. I love what I do. I just don't want to do any more administration. Ugh. So if I can ditch that, I'll be around forever, which might be good or bad. But regardless, these are the two individuals that are going to take us forward into the future. And I'm so honored and proud to have them. They were both a find. So I'm going to pass it over to these two fabulous individuals and sit down and look at the salmon. Thank you. Welcome.
So welcome. This is the third installment of our Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise series with Aon, Dr. Jonathan Bastian. So thank you for coming. How many people were at the second one at the office, the second event at the office? Terry, maybe? 2 people? Couple people? This is great though. I'm so happy that there's a lot of new faces here. This is fantastic. So what we are covering today is men's health. I think that's why most of you gentlemen are here, and some of the wives, because the wives want to keep the gentlemen in line, right? You're supposed to laugh. You're supposed to giggle. Well, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jonathan Bastian. And Dr. Bastian just informed me of something that's really exciting. He is leaving on Sunday for Cannes, France, where he will be graduating with the first longevity certification of its kind in the world. So we are so honored that he's here. I do want to give, he's both Peter and mine's doctor. So Peter has a couple of words to say about that.
Oh, yeah, it's working with Dr. Bastian and his team has been awesome. You know, it just really keeps you dialed in. But we're not here necessarily to be, we're not getting paid to refer to Aon, just want to be clear. This is about making sure that you guys stay healthy, live a long time, and that the advisors that you work with live a long time as well too, so.
We plan to be around for a while, just like Kathy. All right, Dr. Bastian, if you could please join us.
Hello, everybody. For those who have not heard me speak before, it's very casual, it's very open. This room's a bit big for questions, but if you have any questions, save them till the end. We'll have a great Q&A period and go from there. Men's health is unique in the longevity space because men's health is like sneakily very underserved. Women have points of connection with medicine from like initially getting pap smears, going through pregnancy, having delivery, then through menopause and that transition. Men don't have that conversation. They don't have the same connection with their primary care provider. They don't circulate that conversation amongst themselves. And so when they're talking about health optimization longevity, lots of people have various things that they're interested in, podcasts that they'll listen to, things like that, but they're not truly getting like a very clear picture and a clear base of what men's health looks like, what the drivers of men's health look like over time as you age. So that's one. Number 2 is people who carry high stress jobs, high workloads, things like that. That has a secret and sneaky sort of response to the body and hormones and their overall health over time as well. So I want everybody to leave here today with an understanding of like A, how men's health changes over time, B, how some of those things can be influenced by diet and lifestyle and other changes, and then 3, are there pharmaceutical interventions that can help support healthy aging as you go, okay? So those are the key points that I want everybody to take home, and I think, again, save your questions for the end. There's lots of information. And then we'll just dive in. Okay, this is my framework for how I think about health in general, and especially for men. Today we're going to be focusing on the first 2 buckets, sort of biophysical optimization. It's your body, right? Cognitive resilience. So anybody who's carrying high load either at work or at home or trying to manage up to parents or down to kids understands that there's a burden there that needs to be addressed. And then the biggest one that is always missed is like the social component, who you connect with, how do you avoid staying isolated? And I think there's so many similarities between wealth management, setting out your goals and your expectations, and health management. It's the same thing. So as we're going through this, thinking over the next 10 years, just take 1 minute and think about like, what are the things that you want to do, right? Is it picking up your grandkids? Is it being able to go run a marathon? Is it being able to keep up with your kids in sports? Those are all important things that you kind of have to plant in the future that then helps to drive a lot of those changes for what you're willing to do today. As Elise was saying, I'm graduating with this first cohort in longevity medicine in Cannes with some really renowned people. And I think the underlying thesis of everything is that normal aging, how your body declines over time, does not mean optimal aging, okay? There's tons of changes. Our bodies were not meant to live for 100 years. All of our systems, our peptides, our hormones, those all gradually begin to decline. Now, we can accept that as a common path of aging, or you can address those. And I think the big thing for today is we have to address those, understand what the levers are, and then structure it into an approach on how to treat it. So the one that's like top of funnel, top of every guy's head is like testosterone, right? Here's the thing about T. After about age 30, 35, you do naturally have this 1% decline in testosterone over time, okay? Your testes themselves just don't produce as much, and that is absolutely true. The second thing that happens is your testosterone actually just doesn't function as well as getting into the cell and activating the responses that it's supposed to make. And so you end up with this like combination of things where you have this gradual natural testosterone decline, and at the same time, it's just not as receptive. Okay. But here's the sneaky part about T. Everybody thinks testosterone is like one absolute number. It's not, okay? Your testosterone, the base of a testosterone is like cholesterol, okay? Just like oil and water don't mix, testosterone and your blood don't mix. And so what you need is you need a shuttle called SHBG to sort of shuttle that testosterone around to the different cells. As you get older, typically you have more of these shuttles. And so more of these testosterone molecules are actually stuck on the bus, not interacting with cells. And so even if your numbers come back normal, low normal, and the total testosterone range, it does not mean that your body and your cells are getting the testosterone that you expect. The second piece of this, which is like really important and nobody in the community will understand, is that it's not just about how many of these testosterone receptors or testosterone molecules you have floating through your blood. Those are like keys. And just like you can have a key, you also need a lock. And you need that lock on the cell of the testosterone receptor, or on the cell, to allow the testosterone to float through. This is really important and very underutilized. So you can have two men with the same amount. Testosterone ranges are like 200 to 700. Two guys, exact same level. One of these people is going to feel great. The other person is going to feel brutal. They're going to feel tired, low libido, low energy, difficulty putting on muscle mass. And the reason isn't because the total testosterone level is high or low. It's because they have different numbers of locks, different numbers of androgen receptors accepting these things. So like, you start thinking about this, and there's kind of two ways to sort of look at this, which is like, oh yeah, everybody over 35, hit him with the juice, get him on the testosterone. Other guys will be like, no, it's all natural, all lifestyle, all the time. Guys, there's nuance to this. But the beautiful thing about nuance is when you do it correctly, also the risks are substantially left because you're treating not just to a number, but to the symptoms. Okay. So that's testosterone 101. I'm going to carry that through later in the conversation. But it's kind of a mixed crowd, right? Half of this group is going to be out hitting the links, enjoying their best life. You can still have a ton of stress during those periods. The other half of this group is going to be working hard, trying to put in their 9 to 5, get home, spend time with the kids. Both of those things can be stressful, and stress has a massive impact on your hormone profile. It has a massive impact on how you show up cognitively and physically, and it has a huge impact on longevity. So the common thing for these things is that everybody kind of has this vague idea that stress is bad, right? And that chronically undersleeping is bad, and that they know that it's not great for their health, but we now know these mechanisms, right? So when you are under a chronic period of stress, either at work or at home or situationally, that sends out elevated levels of cortisol. That high level of cortisol in your brain tells your brain to turn down the testosterone taps to your testes. Also, the testosterone, that cortisol also in your testes tells your testosterone to make less T. So probably one of the most common complaints that I get from guys, late 30s, 40s, 50s, are like, Doc, my T's low. I have low energy, I can't put on muscle, I can't do the things that I want to do, I don't feel good, right? And you're like, look, your T is low. That's true. And that is one way that we can definitely help support this answer. But let's not pretend like it's the only thing that's impacting your life. These things are very nuanced and interconnected. And so when you're treating something like stress and cortisol and testosterone together, you need to work on a bunch of different levels to see impact. The other thing that happens with these testosterone receptors in the testes is that the actual cells in your testes begin to shrink and decline over time. Cortisol has a negative impact on that as well. So if you've been chronically stressed for 50 years, you're not going to make the same amount of testosterone because you don't have as many cells. And that becomes really important over time because you also naturally lose your testosterone from those testes over the course of your lifetime. So by the time you're 50, the average is 40% of your cells are already gone. And so you begin to see this pathway where addressing testosterone is important, addressing lifestyle is important, and it becomes much easier if you have goals and structure and things in mind. So next I want to chat about just a little bit about one other piece that I think is really important to this. And so this is where, so you have your fat, everyone's got fat on them. If you think about where your fat is located, right? The fat not on the outside of your belly, but on the inside of your belly, the stuff that's like cushioning your organs and things like that, turns testosterone into estrogen. That's why men, after they, age 50, 55, they begin to lose some of their muscle mass because it's all getting converted into estrogen in the belly. Fat, visceral fat, is just purely where testosterone goes to die. And so we need to be thoughtful of that when we're addressing testosterone replacement and we're thinking about how we can improve this, that it's not just about fixing the T, but also that it's not getting converted too much into estrogen through the visceral fat. So you have to address that as well. Just as a rule of thumb, visceral fat, that fat on the inside of your stomach that's surrounding your organs and sometimes gets tucked into your liver, this is the worst kind of fat. This fat carries so much risk for increasing inflammation markers, increased risk of heart attack and stroke, increased risk of sugar responses and metabolic dysfunction. If you can eradicate this fat, it is like the key. Every diet, every fitness, every routine you've ever heard of, the core mechanism of why they all think it's great is because they all focus on getting rid of this visceral fat. Any questions about that so far? So the question was, how do we get rid of visceral fat through diet and nutrition? It's a great question. So 2 things. Number 1 is, on its own, visceral fat's hard to eradicate. It's some of the hardest fat to get rid of. The way that you get rid of visceral fat, the best way to go, low carb, ketogenic for like 3 months, and then transitioning to a more permanent low carb diet after that. The reason for that is because the signaler of visceral fat is insulin. So just as kind of a quick crash course, you guys are eating your lunch right now, you have a bun, that bun gets dissolved in the stomach, right? Becomes sugars and then gets absorbed into your bloodstream. From there, you need insulin to take that sugar molecule and drive it into the cell. Insulin is a wonderful molecule at taking that sugar and putting it into the cell. Over time, either from genetics or lifestyle choices or just getting older in general, the tendency is that you need more insulin to take the same amount of sugar and drive it into the cell. That's why one of the key things that we look at is fasting insulin as a marker, and the end stage of that, when the insulin's not even responding to the cell at all, is that's when your sugars creep up in your blood, that's when you end up with diabetes. The other thing that insulin does is it tells your body to hold onto fat more tightly. And so one of the places that it really drives that is in and around your stomach. So people who have higher levels of insulin, either are diabetic, have other risk factors like that, have a tendency to carry more fat around their belly, and it's the insulin driving that response. Things that are good from a lifestyle piece, dietary piece that are important and responsible for that, low carbohydrate diet, you bring your sugars down, ketogenic diet, no sugars at all, brings your insulin down, and that gradually pieces off the visceral fat. From a nutritional or from a fitness perspective, usually that's like the key zone 2 cardio. That's a point where you're kind of walking around and finding that you're really not, you're a little bit out of breath, but you can maintain a conversation, right? So, 4 degrees of incline, watching a show, the mind-numbing, slow burn, that's the spot that actually gets rid of that visceral fat. Yeah. Answer it. Any other questions on that? Okay, so testosterone replacement. Okay, here's the thing about the things that I'm going to be talking about. When you think of these things, they feel dramatic and they feel like a heavy hammer that you're trying to replace something with. And that is 100% accurate. When you're not doing these things with nuance, you end up with more side effects, you end up with more complications, and you don't feel that great. The goal is to really support some of this testosterone replacement and at the same time curb some of these other things that are likely having a downward compression on testosterone in the first place. Now, the benefits of testosterone replacement just stack as you get older. When you're young, and I'd say between 35 and 50, that means really the benefits are often like fitness, cognitive performance, less fatigue, less irritability, anxiety, better sleeps. But as you sort of cross that 50-year-old threshold, the benefits actually become much more about longevity than they do about just symptom management. So we know testosterone, it's an anabolic hormone. It helps to build things. Anabolic hormones help to support your bones by building up strength, your muscles, which help to avoid having a fall. They help with hair and skin regrowth. There's even good evidence that testosterone, when appropriately dosed, has an anti-inflammatory effect on your cardiac and vascular system. These testosterone receptors are found everywhere, which is why lots of guys will take it for like muscle improvement and strength improvement, and find that like their mood's a little better, they sleep a little better, because these receptors are everywhere in the body. Now, there's lots of different ways to replace and support testosterone. The easiest two are either through an injection, which is like under the skin, once a week injection, or a daily cream. And you can titrate both of those, based on your personal profile, based on your sex hormone binding globulin, based on what your symptoms and goals are. And when you do it correctly, you don't end up with these massive fluxes that you can sometimes see that makes everybody a little bit more concerned about using these things consistently. Now, here's the key. Testosterone has a negative feedback loop, right? So if you're 40 and you start testosterone and you're injecting testosterone every day or once a week, then over time, that's going to tell your brain, we have enough. which is going to then tell your brain to tell your testes to shut off the production factory because we already have enough over time. So if you're on this for like 2 or 3 years, that's a big deal. After 50, I would say, maybe 55 depending, that testosterone's gone, right? So it's no different than if somebody has low thyroid and you're trying to replace thyroid replacement, right? Nobody bats an eye about that. But as soon as it's men talking about testosterone replacement, it's like this very avant-garde thing. This is just hormone replacement at its finest. Now, the other key, if you overshoot with T, the big one is blood. So testosterone's an anabolic hormone. It makes muscle cells, it makes bone cells, it also makes red blood cells. And so the risk is you always have to be measuring your blood levels to make sure that they're not going too high or too. The theoretical risk is that if you have too many blood cells, they're going to form a clot, and you're going to form a clot that way. We've never had it in the clinic because we keep pretty tight eyes on these things, but that's one of the considerations. Now, I think anyone over 40, 45, testosterone replacement, direct replacement's great. For guys who are more interested in trying to increase their natural production of testosterone, maintain fertility, maintain those cells on the testes themselves, the new one to market is called N-clomiphene. The nice thing about this is instead of just giving you straight testosterone directly, it tells your brain to secrete more of that signal to your testes that then helps to support more testosterone production on its own. And the value of that is that then you end up with a lot of the benefits of testosterone, maintaining fertility, maintaining this sort of, getting a lot of the benefits from the testosterone therapy in terms of mood, cognitive support, things like that. And the nice thing is it doesn't have to be permanent, After 2 years, if you're like, look, life has normalized, the stress response is better, sleep's better, structure's better, great, come off of it because your testes are going to be producing it on its own as well. Now that is a really great idea if you have enough testosterone production in your testes in the first place, which is why testosterone direct replacement, perfect as you get older, and clomiphene, some of these other treatments, better for when you're younger, still trying to maintain your T, trying to work through some of the stresses and cortisol that you have, and support that over time. Okay, so where people get caught in this trap is you get so focused on testosterone. If any guy is going to be talking about anything in a locker room, it's always T. But the truth is that is a small piece of the puzzle. Let's see if this thing comes back. The bigger thing that is important is actually cutting out this trap, this like visceral trap, this visceral fat trap. And so by getting rid of some of that visceral fat, you naturally increase your testosterone on its own, right? So everybody's kind of heard of these, these like far out pieces in terms of Ozempic, Mounjaro, Zepbound, Wegovy. What these drugs do fundamentally is they bring down your insulin level, which then over time gets rid of your visceral fat, which then over time just naturally drives up your testosterone levels. The second value of these things is that they actually have a very potent anti-inflammatory cascade, right? So we all think of them for like weight loss and body comp and stuff like that, and that is helpful, right? These things have way further reaching effects than just that. And I would say, like, again, the cohort of people that I know, medical directors in longevity clinics across North America, will use this not just, like, maybe not even at all for body composition changes, purely because the anti-inflammatory effects are so protective for cardiac, renal, liver, and brain. So there's ancillary benefits to this regardless. The way these things work, and again, this is all about nuance. This feels like a hammer. It feels like something big and very distant from what somebody would actually consider doing. But when you use them productively at usually like a fraction of the actual dose that gets prescribed in the community, you get some of this anti-inflammatory benefit, some of this visceral fat reduction, some of this improvement in hormone production, without some of the other consequences of like trying to ramp this up to a high dose. So we talked about visceral fat. And so when we see patients and they're interested in T, or they're interested in just men's health optimization, and we're talking about this sort of biophysical optimization, the questions that we ask are like, A, look, testosterone's a part of it. We can be open to that conversation. But you have to be addressing the other pieces that are driving your testosterone down in the first place, because those are probably bigger features in terms of improving your longevity than just replacing testosterone on its own. And I certainly think that these GLPs have benefit over time. We know that. The studies just continue to roll in. The one that I usually recommend is called Zepbound. It's the newer version called tirzepatide. Lower rate of all-cause mortality, lower rate of heart attack and stroke, lower rate of congestive heart failure, lower rate of liver disease, lower rate of renal disease. It's just like raises all ships. And it's not just the metabolic piece. It's the anti-inflammatory piece that we don't see with other medications yet. I'm not even going to go into the cardiovascular benefits because it's going to take too long. But I think we used to think that like plaque formation in your heart that causes a heart attack and stroke is like just because you have too much cholesterol. Is not. There's way, way more intricacy around it. The big ones are how flexible are your arteries and how much inflammation do they have. GLPs solve for both. Okay. I think GLP-1s, amongst other drugs that are coming to market for longevity, are going to be a huge part of where we're going to look at them in 5 years like we did blood pressure medications 20 years ago. It's just a part and parcel. Do more of a deep dive in terms of your inflammatory process, identify those. There's other things that you can do naturally, increasing fiber, taking berberine. These are two things that naturally titrate give you that same stimulation. And I think these two things are great. And again, a low carbohydrate diet or even a few months of a ketogenic diet to give your body a reset from insulin, critical, okay? You can go a long way with those. The key that I think about is, and that's usually where we start with patients, frankly, and if they're not meeting the goals after that, then you kind of take things up as you go. I'm not going to touch too much on peptides because I think there's a lot of information out there. This is going to be the future of medicine. Those are coming down the pike, but the Health Canada regulations as they currently stand are in flux. So what I will say though is really what a peptide is, just as a basic runner. A peptide is a small protein, functions similar to a hormone. It's a tiny, anywhere from 10 to 200 chain amino acid branch. It's very small. And it is a signaling molecule for other things. Just like hormones decline as they age, and just like hormones, how your cells respond to that decline changes over time, the same is also true for peptides. Okay. The one note that I think I missed in here that I wanted to address was really just like fitness. How does that fit in? How does sleep fit in? Here's what I would say. The two things that are the most important for testosterone and frankly, insulin resistance, those are the two big drivers that get like every guy, comes down to two pieces: sleep quality and resistance training. Sleep is a massive, underutilized, undervalued piece of longevity. If you were a guy and you snored just a little bit, get a sleep study, because obstructive sleep apnea of any kind tanks testosterone, tanks your sleep quality, increases your risk of heart attack and stroke. If you are chronically stressed, right, and you're carrying that load throughout the day, you need to find a way to break that before you go to bed. That can be a hot bath, it can be infrared sauna, it can be a cold shower, but you have to do something to set yourself up for a quality sleep routine. That first portion of your deep sleep, that's when all of your testosterone gets released. If you have poor sleep quality, your testosterone naturally goes down 10 to 15%. On the resistance training side, it becomes even more important. Heavy load resistance training, right? So that's like heavy weights, not like dumbbells, not like light things, but like heavy loads for you is where you get the secretion of these growth hormones, this testosterone replacement. These are the things that drive your testosterone up and your insulin down. Every fitness model that we have, every diet fad that we have, ultimately comes down to trying to drive up positive anabolic hormones and driving down insulin and sugars. So what I want you guys to take away from today is that aging over time for men, wildly under-discussed. And you need to be thinking about it more because it's important. 2, there are lots of lifestyle things that can address those 2 pieces. And 3, there's lots of pharmacology that when done correctly does not have even remotely the sort of risk profile that can be expected. And frankly, it has to be done with lifestyle factors to get the most benefit. I think that like longevity medicine, where we're looking at 20, 30 years out is going to be amazing. And so the key for today is figuring out what you can do within your own life to support healthy metabolic health, help manage that cognitive load that we all carry, to give you enough strength and resilience and vitality to meet medicine where it's coming. Thank you. Yeah.
I'd rather not get into a situation where I'm taking pills the rest of my life to solve the problems. I really think these lifestyle things.
As long as I don't have to sing. I'm trying to avoid the situation where I'm taking pills the rest of my life. I know my father's case, half of the pills he were taking were to counteract the side effects of the other half he was taking. So I think this lifestyle thing is really important. My question would be, at our annual physical, should we be asking our doctor for specific blood tests beyond the usual boxes they automatically tick off?
Yeah, great question. So I think everybody heard that. Annual physical, what can you add on and tack on? So I'm going to but your first comment about lifestyle I think is really important as well. So here's the thing with the way that I view the perceptual change that I've made towards longevity medicine is at age 70, average number for a Canadian is like 7 prescriptions, right? So it's more than people think. And those are usually reactively provided because you've had a heart attack, because your blood pressure's out of control, you've had a stroke, you have kidney disease, and then once you have those things, you're on that. So the way that I look at it is if we can look at some of these things preventatively, it doesn't have to be meds. I'd include supplements, berberine, other things in that bucket. The prevention of that just means that by the time that you get to that cohort, you're trying to do some of these things in a preventative fashion instead of a reactive fashion. And I think there's the nice thing about the clinic is everybody has different opinions on what that looks like for them. Okay. Number 2 is absolutely, if I had to pick a few tests that I would recommend you get from your GP, number 1 is fasting insulin, right? So fasting insulin, we've already talked about that one, that was important. Number 2 is a free testosterone. So not just total, which is 95 of that is going to be bound to something, either sex hormone binding globulin or albumin, but a free T, because that's how much is actually floating around in your blood. And then I think the third ones are actually which give you a good evaluation of some of these things, actually aren't labs at all, right? So grip strength, right? So getting one of those grip strength manometers is valuable because it's kind of this surrogate measure of how your body is doing, what the strength is, and you can track those against age profiles over time. And then the fourth one, which is again more nuanced, but sometimes picks up on an Apple Watch or whatever, would be your VO2 max, because that's a good surrogate measure of how your cells are doing. It's like essentially what a VO2 max is it's like how well do you go through the process of exercising, and then how well do you have this sort of, how well optimized is your lung and your cardiac function to take oxygen and put it into the cells? And then lastly, like how well are your mitochondria using those cells efficiently? So grip strength, VO2 max, fasting insulin, free T, done. The only caveat that I've noticed is part of those numbers is interpretation. And so, you're going to go to your GP, they might know about fasting insulin, they might know about free testosterone, but again, they're trying to do a lot of different things. And health optimization in its own bucket is like its own specialty at this point. So I think there's tons of value in getting that as a trend, right? Yeah, great question.
Hi, Dr. Bastian. I've got a lot of clients that are on statins, and maybe walk us through how you work with clients to kind of help manage the kind of consequences and trade-offs.
Yeah. Peter, you're just going to lob this bomb at me and ask me about statins? Okay, so look, here's the deal. Okay, 2 points. The first, actually, let me back this up a third time. My wife always complains that I talk in these very circular fashions. So when somebody asks me a question, like she'd just be rolling in my eyes right now at the answer I'm about to give. But here's the importance of this. Number one, plaque formation is bad, okay? It's non-repairable. You can't retract plaque. Once your arteries have calcium buildup in them, we have no good way of bringing that the other direction. I would say the vast majority of other things for health optimization longevity are going to be very solvable in 20 to 30 years, like very solvable. So this is like the one area that you have to have way more attention to and focus on than all of these other things combined, right? There's lots of ways to do that. So it's like you go to your GP, they're going to do blood pressure, they're going to look at your cholesterol panel, and then they're going to use this population-based curve to figure out what your risk profile is of having a heart attack and stroke in the next 10 years is, right? That is not the way you want to be thinking about cardiovascular health, because cardiovascular health, what you care about is, are you at risk of having a heart attack in 30 years from now? Again, we're trying to meet medicine where it's coming. And so you can get way more granular than that in terms of your risk profile, through genetics, polygenetic risk scoring, more genetic profiling for cardiac health, and then of course imaging. Like you can get specific imaging of your heart so you know what your risk profile is, like specifically. So there's a lot of value in that because that's a big one. Now, the next thing that comes from that is okay, so you go through these things, you have a little bit of plaque show up, we want to treat it, what are we going to do? Well, here's the thing. Statins are amazing at lowering your cholesterol. They decrease vascular inflammation. However, they also suck some of these other micronutrients away, like CoQ10 or ubiquinol, that's really important for mitochondrial health. And so the key is, do the statin, because it's like massively effective. The lowest dose of a statin, let's say the range is like 5 to 40 milligrams, gives you like 80% of the benefit anyway, and that's that daily pill. But if you're going to do that, use that with some of these other pieces to replace those micronutrients that you're not getting, to sort of balance some of those other things. Now, there's tons of other choices now on the market. Okay, so ezetimibe is another common one. Good preliminary evidence in Alzheimer's, good preliminary evidence for driving down your cholesterol profile. Bempedoic acid just came to market a few months ago. It's kind of like a statin, but without the concerning side effects. It's more expensive. But at the end of the day, before you make the judgment on statins or not, what you need to know is like, what is your risk? Because it's very different trying to convince somebody to start a statin or a cardiac medication when they're 40 and have like just some elevated cholesterol. It's a much different conversation when you're like, hey, no, you have plaque buildup. And it kind of comes back to that conversation we were having about the medications. It's like, oh shit, you're going to be on a statin anyway at 70, like, after you've had a heart attack or a stroke. why don't we make this a preventative measure instead of a reactive measure? And then the conversation's just about meeting the patients with where they're at. How aggressive do they want to be? And that's a risk profile conversation. Yeah, in the back.
I got a question here. So what does it look like if we book an appointment? Kind of walk us through that process. How many visits? How long is this there's a series of appointments, that kind of thing? If you can give us a bit of insight into that.
Yeah, for sure. So the key to doing longevity medicine right is we need the landscape. We need the roadmap. And you can't do that unless you have all of these different things at play, right? So you do your initial intake, you get some labs, that's part one. Yes, they're more in depth than a primary care provider's, but that's actually only part of the conversation. The other thing is that you do this like AI app, tracks your foods, gives you a sense of your macros. You do a body scan so you get an estimate of like your muscle mass, your visceral fat, your, like what the areas of improvement on. You do a strength and fitness test to understand your baseline. You meet with a naturopath to go through lifestyle and sleep and some of those pieces as well. And then you meet with the physician at the end. Now, this is a big commitment, right? You're committing to trying to like figure some of this stuff out, but it's really important because going through those pieces up front one time then gives you this like super clear roadmap about like what the issues are, where we need to make improvements, where we need to solve. And from there, then there's a variety of different plans and structures to help you get access to that. Most of these things are like a year of core follow-up where you work through a combination of lifestyle things, identifying what your immediate patient goals are, coupling that with what I think your immediate risk profile is in the future. And then you go through this piece sort of on this journey over the course of a year to try and work through some of those things one at a time. The other hardest thing about longevity medicine is like, there's 100 things to work on. There's, you can worry on your gut microbiome, your fat, your testosterone, your sleep. It's never ending. And so the key is to pick one thing at a time that's the biggest pain point, the biggest issue, hammer that down, cross it off the list, and then move on. And the way to do that most effectively is getting this really clear idea of what all the problems are, what all the levers are that you can pull, and then kind of like structuring those one at a time. Yeah. Yeah.
The testing that you're doing, is it typically a genetic methylation test?
Yeah. So the question is genetic methylation test. So there's two places that comes up. Number one is sort of like the most basic version of like a clock that measures your age. So you have your biological age and your chronological age. Chronological age written on your driver's license. That's how old you are. You can also measure your biological age, which is like looking at your DNA to see what happens over time is that your DNA gets more methylation pattern, this little like subgroup that sort of is commonly associated with aging. You can do that, and we have that, but I actually think it's not that helpful because it's hard to reverse and slow. Where what you're describing, the more advanced version of that, which is what we're bringing on in the fall, is called multiomics. So instead of just looking at your DNA, hard to reverse, not really changeable, not that modifiable, not that helpful. Multiomics is this blend of like your DNA, which is like your hardware, your epigenome, which is what like tells your DNA what to read. It's why like your eye cell and your skin cell are different. It's the same blueprint, just something reading other parts of it, coupled with like protein calculations, mitochondrial DNA, a whole bunch of stuff. And then you can wrap that all into one thing. And the cool thing is it'll tell you like which organ is aging at what rate. And then it helps to lay out the roadmap of like, okay, well, where do we gotta, if your brain is aging 5 years faster than your heart and your liver, you better take care of your brain, put that up front. So that's coming out in the fall. That's like brand new medicine that's just coming to it. So the short answer is like, yes, we can do DNA methylation testing, but I actually think what we care about are things that we can change. And that's what I focus on.
I have a question with regards to us gals in the room. So we go through a lot of hormonal change monthly. You guys are all empathetic, I'm sure. Then we hit the biggie of menopause and men's response to our changing hormones. In other words, andropause.
Yeah. It's a great question. And what's really interesting about that question is the thing about menopause in women is like progesterone, estrogen, they fall immediately. Everyone's aware of them. Women have testosterone too. It's the most common sex hormone they have. But instead of being this rapid decline, it's this slow trickle. Men sometimes have the same slow trickle, but because of the other things that we were talking about, right, in terms of like androgen receptor density and how patients sort of respond to these things, some patients will notice like a massive change, total free testosterone going from like 500 to 450. They're like, doc, I feel terrible. I don't know what's going on. And other guys, you know, they'll start at 700 and then go down at 600, and it's a totally different game for them as well. So it's not quite the same in the sense that like you get this rapid decline off the cliff, but what I was talking about earlier where it's like testosterone, sex hormone binding globulin gradually accumulates from that visceral fat, you get this thing where as you get older and you carry more visceral fat and you lose your testosterone, it starts amplifying things, because it's not just the testosterone lost, it's also that testosterone is getting more bound by those shuttles that are kind of holding onto it more tightly. So functionally, you have a more rapid decline as you age. Yeah. So the question is LPA, lipoprotein A. We test everybody coming in. It is a genetic marker of sticky plaque, right? So you have your cholesterol. We know that, you know, LDL generally bad cholesterol. Your LPA is like a stickier version of these plaques. It's not that much, but it forms calcium faster. So people who have really high levels of genetic LPA have a tendency to have more heart attacks and stroke. One of your valves, your aortic valve, has a tendency to get more calcified. And just generally, it's something that we want to try and reduce. Now, it's a genetic thing. We don't have, I mean, it's coming, 5 years from now it'll be fixed, but we don't have good drugs to treat that specifically, which is why that conversation about cardiac risk profiling becomes so important. Because if you can't treat that, well, you'd better figure out exactly where your heart is at and treat the other stuff that you do have control over. So I think there's like, LPA is a unique thing. It's like a genetic thing. You can't change it. Doesn't change with diet, doesn't change with lifestyle, doesn't change with hormones or GLP-1s or statins or ezetimibe or anything. But it is pretty important because it's an independent risk factor for all the badness I just described. Yeah, Kathy. Okay, so we talked a bit about peptides. Peptides are like the wild west of medicine. They're in the same bucket as like stem cells or regenerative medicine. And people go, the interesting thing about peptides is they're naturally occurring in the body. When something is naturally occurring in the body, unless you change the vehicle of how it's delivered, you cannot patent it, okay? And because you cannot patent these, there is no big pharma that like provides these things en masse, which means you get two different versions of this, right? You get like the gym bro version, which is like, oh yeah, these things are naturally occurring, hit them with the juice. And there's truth to that. Like these things are probably quite helpful in their own right. And at the same time, we don't know the consequences. We don't know the side effects yet. The easiest example of one that I was going to discuss earlier is called BCP157. It's a gut peptide, helps to repair muscles and tendons. It helps to do that by increasing blood vessels to those areas that have bad blood vessels. However, you also have lots of small blood vessels behind your eye, in your retina. And if you have too many of those, the back of your retina falls off. It's called macular degeneration. And so everyone's like, oh yeah, BCP157, take it forever. I love it, makes me feel youthful. Great, but we don't know that it's not causing retinal detachment because we don't have the data. So I think it's coming. I think anytime there's enough forward motion, you end up starting with qualitative studies and then working into quantitative studies, and then eventually it becomes more accessible. But it's also, there's so many other things that we can optimize first. I save that conversation, once everything else has kind of been, once the levers are all pulled. It's the cherry on top, and again, that's a big conversation about risk profile, because it's not just, is it accessible in Canada? Is Health Canada approving it? Like, that's only half of it. The other half of it is like, you have to find a quality distributor. You don't know where these things are coming from. They're coming from China or Russia or somebody's basement. And so they're going to be really helpful. It's going to be really helpful messengers. Anytime you have something very specific that sends one message to one part of the body, it's better. But the risk profile for that always feels a little eerie for me. So the question is, are you supposed to cycle BCP 157? If you're asking for the friend, telling, not medical advice. So here's the thing. BCP 157, if you're going to cycle it, 6 weeks max, right? It's good for regenerative repair. You often, I don't mind coupling it with TB 500 as a theoretical. I think but the risk is, if you're going to do peptides, period, you have to cycle these things. We don't have enough data of their long-term consequences to not.
You mentioned that resistance training is really important. What other physical activities would you recommend?
Yeah. So, like just in general? Yes. Yeah. So I think there's different parts of fitness that we're trying to key in on, right? The first one, which is kind of an immovable brick, is you just have to do heavy resistance training, period. At the gym, there's just no good way around it. And that is painful, and nobody likes resistance training, generally, except for people who love exercise, and it's easy to sell them on it. The value of resistance training is what it gleans you in 5 to 10 years, right? So as you get older and your muscles get weaker, you, again, men and women lose 1 to 2% of their muscle mass every year after 50. You need to keep in mind why you're doing it. It's not just doing it about feeling good today, it's doing it for those goals that you're trying to reach. That's why I talk about like grandkids all the time, trips that people want to go on, experiences that they want to have. That's the nugget. It's not trying to look good or feel good, and that makes that more applicable. The other thing that is really important is like any kind of unilateral movement, right? So squash, pickleball, tennis, those are great programs for 2 reasons. Number one, it gets that zone 2 heart rate up pretty consistently, and that's really important over time. Number 2 is it's really helpful and supportive for unilateral limb movements. You want to strengthen not just like both arms, bench, chest press. You want to be able to strengthen your core and your hips and your glutes and your butt on each leg independently, because that's what stops you from having like a fall when you're 80. It's not, everybody thinks that like a hip fracture, having a fall and having a break, is this like independent variable that just happens by chance. It's not. It's a slow accumulation of decreasing testosterone, decreasing movement, less unilateral muscle strength, less unilateral balance and coordination, and then you fall. And then it's just like a time game. So anything that helps to support resistance training, done. Number 2 is like unilateral movements and strengthening, also really important. And then number 3, and again, this like kind of is a bit woo-woo, but the data's excellent, social, right? Whatever you're gonna be doing from a fitness perspective, that's why golf is so good. It's like everybody walks, you talk, you're outside. You know, it's not that great for like your physical health in terms of bringing up your zone 2 cardio or pushing hard against resistance, but that social element is a critical element. It's got the same data as if you were smoking and then you stopped. That's how important having a social community is, and so any kind of physical activity that helps to support that is a win in my books.
We've gotten a lot of like health messaging over the years that's kind of just like come and gone. A lot of stuff. I know my mom kicked butter out of the house and brought us Basel, and we all know that's probably not the play anymore. Yeah. The high sugar diets, avoid fat and all that stuff. Yeah. How rock solid are peptides right now?
Not solid, you know. I think peptides is like a super broad term. It's like hormones or supplements, right? So it's like parsing out the evidence from the weakness is really challenging. I'll give you an easy example. BCP 157, the one that we were talking about that some of us may or may not use, has no human data, right? It doesn't have any, except for anecdotal, right? So the pump, the popularity doesn't match the science. There's other peptides, sermorelin, alpha-thymosin A, that have great data and quality over time that are probably going to stand the test of time. And then thirdly, like if Ozempic, Mounjaro, the new one coming on market, retatrutide, those are peptides. Those are signaling molecules just with a different delivery method, which is why they're able to be compounded. So the long and short of it is, the hype is real. There's going to be a ton of value, but I wouldn't hitch my thing to that horse yet, because it's like we just don't have the data. And there's other things that we can do that we've got like a ton of data from. And then once you optimize for those, yeah, okay, look, if you want to push the limits, that's a risk conversation, you know. Yeah, does that answer it?
Yeah, like the GLP-1s heavily studied now, and like most people know about it. And
Yeah.
whatever, but a whole whack of them coming off the market nowadays.
Yeah.
But it's the future.
Yeah, I think it's like, okay, but here's the thing. The craziest thing about just gym bros in general is like they're always ahead of like the curve by like 20 years. They were doing testosterone and they're, you know, but dosing matters, right? Keeping these things in a tight, narrow dose, less heart attack, less stroke, less risk. So a lot of these other things that are coming to market, peptides, as the most example, yeah, there's gonna be value, but it's all about like we don't know what that risk profile is yet. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah, one more. Yeah.
What are your top 3 to 5 supplements that you're recommending?
Yeah, great question. Top 3 to 5 supplements. Number 1, vitamin D for sure, right? 4,000 international units. Okay, it's more than the standard 2. It's really hard to overdose, go up to 4 daily. Number 2, I would say, is magnesium bisglycinate, 400 milligrams at night. You're supposed to get magnesium from the soil. We don't. There's no magnesium left in sort of current farming practices. Magnesium bisglycinate at night is really important for sleep. It also helps to support DNA repair. And so that's a good one. Number 3, I would say, is probably omegas, like omega-3, omega-3/6 combo. Usually like, I think the dosing is DHE 1,500 milligrams to the EPA, which is 3,000 milligrams. So it's a high dose, but that's got great studies for cardiovascular benefit by decreasing markers of inflammation. And then fourth is creatine. So 5 milligrams a day, that gets you, for men, is usually the dose. It's really dosed based on how much muscle you have. You're trying to fill up the volume of your muscle. By elevating that dose to like 10, 15, 20 grams, you saturate all the muscle cells and you get creatine supportive in the brain. The value of that is creatine is really important for mitochondria to produce energy. Better energy in the brain, better cognitive function in the brain. So that would be it.
And would you recommend that generally to everybody?
Yeah, I think it's pretty hard to go wrong with that stack. Yeah. Yep.
No fish oil in there?
Omega-3s are the fish oil. Yeah.
So when you're taking heavy therapeutic doses, you really should get tested.
Yeah, absolutely. You could overdo. Look, I'm not going to belabor fish oils because omega-3s are great, right? If you overdo it, sometimes you can have overactivity of your cardiomyocytes and go into AFib. But that's pretty rare because fish oils are hard to take continuously because, well, I find like they are because they taste like fish. Some of them don't. But they're very good supplements. It's exceptionally, same data out of Scandinavia, same thing. Decreased risk of heart attack and stroke over time, less inflammation. Yeah.
Are there any natural, useful sources of creatine?
I actually don't know. I feel like creatine is I'm sure there are. The nice thing about creatine is that most supplements are like quality control is a big deal. Creatine is so easy to make that it doesn't, creatine monohydrate is like ubiquitous and the quality is usually good. So I don't have a great supplement profile for it because there's so many ways to deliver it, gummies, in a shake, as a drink, whatever, that I haven't actually gone that far. It's a good question.
What's your thoughts on nicotine?
Yeah, I think nicotine is, oh man, here's the thing. Andrew Huberman came up with one podcast one time saying like nicotine's pretty good for cognitive function, and then it's just like spewed nicotine everywhere. Here's the trouble with nicotine. On one hand, it's very good for cognitive function, increases your cyclic AMP cycling, helps to promote cognitive distortion, or cognitive benefits. The downside of nicotine is it's also a vasoconstrictor. If you're not worried about cardiac history and health, you should be worried about neurocognitive health, right? The biggest driver of neurocognitive disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, is vascular. And the window to treat that, 40 to 60. So it's like we got all these guys coming in who are using nicotine to help support their cognitive function, and at the same time, it's helping for that, it is helpful for that, but not quite understanding the consequences of that long term over time.
Thank you, Dr. Bastian. What a conversation.